The power system in Shaman King allows you to virtually do anything, from making black holes, submarines, cities, avalanches, and even a helicopter. Whatever you want, whatever you can put your mind to, you can do it. But as amazing as all these things sound, there are restrictions, like the amount of Furyoku a shaman might have. The amount of Furyoku you have will determine whether or not you'll be able to have the powers of a god and do whatever you want, or just be an ordinary shaman. Think of Furyoku like ammo or stamina. You can't make a giant sword or Big Ben without there being some sort of limit. Well, unless you're Hal, because your Furyoku level is over a fucking million. So as you'd imagine, it'd be pretty hard to run out of it. But anyways, yes, Furyoku is basically stamina, and when you get tired, you run out of Furyoku. When your Furyoku is maxed out, you are at your best. But as you begin to conjure more oversouls, you'll start to become exhausted, and this is where the ammo part in Furyoku comes in. You'll have a preset number, and depending on how complex the object that you conjure or construct is, the more Furyoku it's going to cost you, or energy, because you're going to be getting tired from using that much energy to make something. And when it comes to a fight, the last thing you want to do is run out of energy. And this is where Furyoku is a little different from just being your ordinary stamina. You don't necessarily lose energy or get tired from making it, but when your oversoul breaks or the construct is no longer there, that is when you'll start to lose Furyoku. For example, when Tao Ren and Yoh fight for the second time, Yoh conjures an oversoul with 30 of his Furyoku, and Tao Ren conjures an oversoul with 100 of his Furyoku. Now, since Tao Ren's oversoul has 100 spiritual power in it, obviously it's going to be stronger than Yoh's, which is 30. He is able to break Yoh's, and because Yoh's oversoul broke, his Furyoku level will go down by how much Furyoku he put into his oversoul. So Yoh's overall Furyoku is 270. Because he put 30 of his Furyoku into his oversoul, when it breaks, his Furyoku level will now be at 240. Despite Tao Ren putting 100 Furyoku into his oversoul, it's not going to cost anything because his oversoul did not break. As long as your oversoul does not break, or as long as you're not doing anything that is costly, like resurrection, your Furyoku will not go down. So what this means is, to give you an idea on how broken these characters in Shaman King actually are, if Hal put, let's say, 500,000 into conjuring a giant sword, and let's just remember that Hal, this is the same Hal that tanked a nuke in an orbital satellite with his oversoul armor Kurobina, which was stated to cost a little Furyoku. Just imagine that. It took a little bit of Furyoku for this dude to conjure armor or an oversoul that was strong enough to tank a nuke in an orbital satellite. Just what if? What if Hal put 500,000 or hell, even 1,000,000 Furyoku into one singular oversoul? How do you fight that? It's not gonna cost him anything in the fight because you won't be able to fucking break it. A little bit tanked a nuke in an orbital satellite, and we're talking about him using 500,000 to 1,000,000 of his Furyoku for one construct, and he's not going to suffer any repercussions because it's not going to break. He's not going to lose any Furyoku because you can't break the construct. I cannot stress this enough. You will only lose Furyoku if it breaks, and you do not want that to happen. Because once you do run out of Furyoku, you'll probably end up with something ugly like this. When you are tired and run out of Furyoku, this will happen. But you can prevent this from happening by having large amounts of Furyoku like Hal, or being conservative with your Furyoku. But when it comes to having a large amount of Furyoku, there is a catch. You cannot raise your amount of Furyoku because you are given a preset amount of Furyoku at birth. For you guys to better understand this, I'm going to give you an example. So if I'm born in the world of Shaman King, my Furyoku level will be 200. It will not be able to get any higher than that because I am born with that set Furyoku number. Your Furyoku is no different than your senses. You could call it a sixth sense actually. The only way to raise your Furyoku is to die and experience birth again. It is through this rebirth and soul honing your Furyoku rises and your spirit basically evolves. You could technically say that once a shaman's Furyoku rises, they are no longer the same person because their soul becomes one of a higher grade. Well, of course they'll have the same personality, but they are now processing things on a higher level. Yes, the higher your Furyoku, the better your perception becomes. Because, it's your sixth sense and all. And what makes Furyoku so crazy is because a shaman's Furyoku can raise indefinitely, meaning there is no limit to the amount of times you can experience this rebirth process and raise your Furyoku. For example, if Hal really wanted to, he could really actually reach a Furyoku level of 2 million if he really wanted to. And another way to get a higher Furyoku level is to experience a near-death state. And characters like John and Blocken take advantage of this because they constantly put themselves in a near-death state. So that means their Furyoku is constantly increasing as time passes by. Your Furyoku overall is an estimate on how strong you are as a shaman and how much spiritual energy you have at your disposal. Once you run out of Furyoku, you will indefinitely lose the fight. There is no limit to how much Furyoku you can have if you keep yourself in a near-death state or constantly reincarnate like the main villain Hal. With a large amount of Furyoku, you can do anything you put your mind to.